there is such a sticking point with Raptors fans right now regarding needing a center, needing to replace Jakob Poeltl. And I just have never understood it. And I just do not understand the infatuation right now with Zach Edey potentially ending up on this team. And I really want to try and get to the bottom of it. The Amateur Hour Production Network is dedicated to Toronto Raptors content. We do videos and we also do live streams, which go long on the main channel. So to make it easier for you guys to watch and to digest, we have the Amateur Hour Clips channel. We're going to take the best highlights and segments from those live streams on Amateur Hour Sports and put them right here for you to enjoy. So if you like what you see along the way, make sure you do hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel as well. With so much consistent content coming out as well as post-game shows during the season, you're not going to want to miss out. Lots of comments coming through. I think a lot of the people maybe in the stream, perhaps on my side, but even still, it just doesn't really make sense to me why there is this big desire from the majority of Raptors fans to bring in a center. Why is center regarded as the most important position to address the draft? I don't know, just sometimes I'm completely fine with being in the minority on a certain thing. I'm completely fine with people disagreeing with me, but what I like to do in those scenarios is try and come to, go through the process, go down the path of how somebody could come to that conclusion that center is the most important position. Zach Edey is the right pick for this team. And I just can't get there. I just cannot get there with this discussion. I cannot get to the point where I'm thinking, yeah, I understand why somebody would want Zach Edey. And it's such an overwhelming amount of Raptors fans that feel this way. 70% of voters here say they'd be happy if the Raptors selected Zach Edey with the 19th overall pick. I'd be definitely in the 30% that say no here. There's just bigger positional needs, and personally, I'm not convinced on Zach Edey. It's a shame. Look, I want to support Canadian players, but just trying to think about what's best for the Raptors, I don't think it's Zach Edey. And spilling over from the Zach Edey discussion, which granted, people here are saying that to be happy with Zach Edey. That's not necessarily meaning that they wouldn't be happier with a different position. To just be happy with Zach Edey. But even still, I also asked what positions should the Raptors focus on drafting with the 19th overall pick. And 60% of people said center. Like, the overwhelming majority of people think that the center is the most important position for the Raptors to address at the draft. And again, I just cannot understand it. There's just this desire for Zach Edey to end up on the Raptors. Even mock drafts now, like this one on the Bleacher Report, saying that Zach Edey is the man for the Raptors. Also, the pro comparison being JV is just astonishing. But anyways, it just, I just cannot get to that point. I don't see why this is necessary for the Raptors to move with. I agree that the Raptors need a center, but I also feel like they need a point guard more than they need a center. They're probably going to need a shooting guard more than they're going to need a center. They need a forward more than they need a center. And yeah, they also could use a third center for this team. But the desire here to replace Jakob Poeltl, the desire here to, your most significant asset for acquiring a player in the offseason is that 19th overall pick, using that on a center, it just doesn't sit with me for whatever reason. And the Raptors, yes, a center is something they should add, but backup point guard's bigger and more important. Big wing defender is bigger and more important. And if Gary Trent Jr. leads in free agency, shooting guard, floor spacing becomes a whole lot more important there. Jakob Poeltl and Kelly Olynyk, I could make the case, is the best positional depth the Raptors have here. They don't have a backup point guard. If Gary Trent's here, okay, they've got Gary Trent, Grady Dick for that two guard, and that's your most sound 1-2 punch in the depth chart. You've got R.J. Barrett and Scotty Barnes, who are backed up by Ochai Agbaji, who's solid in that position. But I think you're the most assured with Jakob Poeltl, who's a high-quality starting center, and Kelly Olynyk is the backup there. When Jakob Poeltl's out, you do need to add in more size. You need to add in a sizable third center. I agree, because if Jakob Poeltl's out, it can't just be Kelly Olynyk. You need another rim protector 100%. But again, the hierarchy of priorities here, the hierarchy of needs, the center is just not at the top of this list. So I've tried to explore what is it about Zach Edey that people are so enamored by? What is it about him? What is it about Edey that other people are seeing that I'm not seeing here? I understand this is a back-to-back National Player of the Year. I understand that, but I said he's also 7'4" in socks and he's got a 7'11" wingspan. But again, I keep pushing. The reality is the defense. It's the defense in space. It's the pick and roll defense. It's getting picked on the perimeter. I struggle. I think he's got a high floor, but I don't think he brings as much to the Raptors as somebody else with that 19th overall pick would. And again, I think what the infatuation here is, honestly, in the least disrespectful way possible, understanding the ins and outs of the draft is difficult. Like, outside of the top 5-10, how much is, honestly, with the most respect possible, how much is the casual fan really looking at the draft? Every year I do tons of content centered around the draft. And even last season, for the 13th overall pick, I do tons of videos because I love covering the draft. I want to educate as much as possible on the players involved with the draft. Even then, people some people just don't like the draft content. They're just not as interested in these players. They're not interested until the player actually ends up in a Toronto Raptors uniform. Then it becomes, okay, who is this guy? Let's figure this out. But for Zach Edey, you've got a player, like I said, back-to-back Player of the Year in college. You've got that. You've also got the Canadian aspect. Here's a Canadian player who played at the FIBA World Cup in 2023 and won a bronze medal with Team Canada over there. The potential Zach Edey ends up on, who knows, could he end up on the Olympic roster? I don't think so, but I guess there's a chance he could end up on the Olympic roster because there's just such a, although it wouldn't make sense for him to do that because he's got to work on getting ready for the NBC. Anyways, maybe he would make it if he wanted to play at the Olympics. What I'm trying to say is he's a household name to a lot of basketball fans, especially to Canadian basketball fans. So there's Raptors fans who already feel as though there's a need for a center to come into the team, which I disagree with. And here's this back-to-back National Player of the Year, and he's Canadian. You've heard of him. You know who he is. So that's where people go and make the connection there. Well, hey, it's a Canadian. I want a center. This makes sense for the Raptors draft. These mock drafts have him in the top. Some people have him super late lottery. So the discussion goes towards bringing Zach Edey into the team. That's where this fascination with the player does arise. So for me, I can understand it, but I continue to try and preach here that the center isn't the most important thing that the Raptors do need with the team. I think at 31st overall, hey, you've already addressed something earlier on. Take a chance on a player like this who has a higher floor, who has a high floor, who can play a specialist role at the very least, who at the minimum is 7'4" and can protect the rim, who can score in the post, who can score on the inside. I see the appeal of that, just not quite that high in the draft. But trying to investigate why fans are so interested in the player, I honestly just think it's down to, my day job is covering sports, mainly the NBA. My secondary job, which is creating content for the amateur production network, as I call it, it's me creating content around the NBA. So all day I'm focusing on the NBA. And in the summer leading up to draft, I'm focusing on draft prospects. That's not what everybody does. That's not how everybody handles getting basketball information. So it's just, to me, it's just, I know who Zach Edey is. This is the guy that I am interested in. But I don't know. Are there people out there who are super invested? I mean this like not disrespectfully, but the people out there who are very invested into the players available in this draft, are those people as well focused in on Zach Edey? If so, then I'd like to hear a compelling argument as to why he should be who the Raptors are seriously targeting and making their priority with the 19th overall pick. And hey, if he goes earlier and it's not something the Raptors can address in the draft, I still don't think a center is the priority for this team in the offseason. I'd like to pick one up, but not before the Raptors worry about backup point guard, working on their defense, working on bringing in floor spacing to the team. And then at that point, hey, yeah, a center is definitely something the Raptors do need to consider in this position, of course. I don't know. I'm trying. I hate it. I hate having to be on this side of the argument for a Canadian player. I really, really do. But somebody's got to educate me. Somebody's got to put me on to Zach Edey. For real.